In 2008, I had an experience where previously my life was very much full of drama and chaos and self-fulfilling prophecies, if you will, because my self-talk was that which was less than optimal. But less than optimal because it was creating my reality, which was that of contrast, that of chaos and drama and unhappiness. And I looked outside myself for all of it. I looked outside myself for fulfillment and for happiness and for soothing, and thought it was all outside of myself. And then I saw the drama or the chaos or the conflict as also outside of myself. So I navigated as a victim. This is happening to me. The summer of 2008 was a very interesting year on many levels, but my elderly mother living with my husband and my young toddler son, who is 2 years old. And my husband, we moved from Los Angeles to Las Vegas to accommodate my elderly mother coming to live with us. And in that process of moving, we were very excited about a new opportunity, a new city, having my mom come and giving her a chance to really thrive because she was elderly. She had fallen and broken her hip. She was living in Maryland. She was alone a lot. She was lonely. She was calling me and we would speak every day. We were like two peas in a pod, right? Our relationship was super, super close. And she was my best friend. And we spoke every day and she was always complaining. That is kind of a common thread of my family is they focus on the negative, lifting up the martyr, lifting up the people that are struggling. And so we were raised in the kind of concept of, oh, poor, fill in the blank of that person. So we really thought that moving mom to Vegas with us was going to give her, a new chapter. She was going to thrive. It was going to be great. We get to Vegas in December of 2003. And early 2004, my husband was in an automobile accident where he was rear-ended at a stoplight. He had nowhere to go. He could see the truck coming, but he could not move anywhere. So he had to brace himself. And that is a moment that changed the trajectory of all of our lives. So he was in chronic pain. He had neck and back injury. And that story goes on to hospitalization, a lawsuit that just documented his disability and his pain every single day. And if you know about the language, right, about the power of our language and our unconscious, our subconscious, our conscious minds, and how we program ourselves, you know that if you are documenting and you're writing your disability every single day for 4 years, what's going to happen? It's just going to perpetuate the disability. But that's the way the system is set up. So this is what he did. And then he ended up getting pneumonia and he was hospitalized, almost died, major steroids to keep him alive. There was just a lot. And so in this young family that had such potential for happiness, the bright light was that I was a 42-year-old mom, the same age as my mom had me, and blessed with a beautiful, healthy baby boy, and he was our light. And so in the kind of drama of our lives, there were a lot of different complications that had to do with my mom really becoming a shadow of who she was, and my husband who was falling into a deep depression, into a hole of despair, of physical disability, and we were not thriving. And then I was sick all the time. I had everything that came down the pike, and that's what I would say. Don't get near me if you're sick, I'm going to get it, right? So I affirmed all this illness, and in my internal struggle, it manifests in the physical form. So I had upper respiratory infection, so right around the heart, right? So the lungs around the heart, and if you follow chakras, that would mean something, right? Throat infections, urinary tract infections, and if you're familiar with Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life, all of those emotional traumas and triggers can be manifested in the physical form with dis-ease in the body. So I was getting signals left and right. And so my husband at the time, we are no longer married, but we had decided that he wanted to go for a retreat, a 10-day Vipassana, which is a 10-day Noble Silence retreat in Colorado, to really help him get through this trauma that he was dealing with. And during that time, I was again sick, and I had at that point really moved away from medications for all these illnesses that I had. I was working on myself holistically, and it wasn't working. And so I had agreed to go and get some medication, some antibiotics, so that he felt comfortable going into this 10 days of noble silence because there's no communication. They take your phone. There was like no communication for 10 days. And in that process, I did that. He went into noble silence and I proceeded to get very ill. The antibiotics weren't working. Days went by. At one point, I wasn't sure what was happening with my son, what he was doing. I didn't know if I had fluid, when was the last time I had water or I had something to drink. My mother, who was always there, seemed to disappear. And then I found myself lifting outside my body. And once I realized that, oh, I could transition, I was able to grab my phone and call my girlfriend, who is actually my son's godmother, to come get him because I was very ill. And she did, and she said she'd keep him overnight. And that kind of gave me a sense of peace that, oh, okay, at least he was taken care of. And as soon as she took him, I laid in bed and I went to the light. My spirit left my body and I felt this freedom that was not ever felt before. This natural bliss that was just so extraordinary. The love, and most near-death experiencers talk about the love, but what's funny about that is that the love and the word that we have is not what it is. It is so much more, so more expansive, so much fuller than what our really concept could ever be. We can't possibly understand the concept because we're so programmed into what we think love is, the conditions of what we think love is. And so I was in this light and I was like, woohoo, I'm ready to go. It felt like I was on kind of like this, I was in this way station or this platform of a train station, not in visual or physicality, but that was just kind of like the feeling because where I was just pure light. I was a sphere of light. We were in light. And why I say we is because there were two beings that were approaching me from far off in the distance. And I didn't have a body. I had no qualms about not having a body. And these two beings came towards me and communicated with me telepathically. And the one on the left was a little taller and fuller that felt very masculine. The one on the right was a little smaller and felt feminine energetically. But they morphed in and out like into the outline of a human form. And then they communicated with me individually as well as one united consciousness. I did not know them. They were not a religious figure that I knew. They weren't a family member. I just called them light beings because they glowed light. And they morphed into two different kind of outlines because they were also light. So there was the expansive light, the most whitest of lights you can imagine, lightning strike white. And then I was light, and then these light beings were light, but you could differentiate kind of by the outline or the variations of light. And they communicated with me that it was not my time. I did have free will to make a choice. And so when we went through this process, because I was ready to go, I was like I was home. I describe it as like getting off this roller coaster that you have really wanted to go on and you're really exhilarated by the ride. But, you know, when you start coming into the platform and you're like, woo, that was an amazing ride. Yeah, and I don't need to go on that again, right? And it kind of felt like that, like it was a ride and I'm so glad I'm done. But what they explained to me is they wanted me to go through what I described as a relationship review. And for many years, I didn't listen or read about anyone else's near-death experience because I just didn't want it to kind of filter into mine. But over the last couple of years, I have explored others and listened to them, and I've found it interesting about common threads and also those that are very different. But so instead of a life review per se, mine was a relationship review. And so I would feel the energy of a person, but it was the relationship that I had, the wisdom, the knowledge that I gleaned from the relationship, and the pure love and just adoration, really, of the experience of the soul that was that person. There were no woulda, coulda, shouldas around it. And there was not one iota of judgment around this experience. And it was all just pure love and appreciation and the wisdom and knowledge gleaned from the experience. And I know that I received a lot of different relationships, key people, like my soul team. But the only two that I remembered were my husband and my son. So when one experience, and it was all very visceral, so I would feel the feeling, and then as it faded, the next one would come. And then the one that I remembered of my husband, we were in a very troubled relationship. and it had been going on for some time, a very challenging relationship. But there was none of that in the NDE. It was only this extraordinary love and appreciation for the soul that was known as Jean-Pierre in the book, and the wisdom and knowledge gleaned from the experience. And then as he started to fade away, they brought in my son, and they wanted me to feel that. And it felt like these two light beings had a job to do, which was to convince me to go back. They didn't quite really say that, like, come out and blurt that out, but it was evident that they were like chosen for the job. It was purposeful. So they left my son, again, a toddler, and oh, the yumminess of the love of this being was so extraordinary, so beautiful, so soft. I mean, yummy is just the only word that I can really come up with, because it was just so precious and beautiful, softer than what I had felt for my husband. The love was just softer and purer. And I just was so appreciative of the love and the experience and the wisdom and knowledge that I gained from being this little one's mother for such a short time, but even the process of birthing him. And so after that feeling faded, I was like, okay, let's go. Now, this is interesting piece to the puzzle, because, I came back with certain messages of what I am to share. And one of the messages is non-attachment. And those of us who have children, fur babies, relationships that we are very attached to, this is where the rub comes about the idea of love. The way that we love here on the planet is we love with attachment. For us to get to really that expansive love, there is no attachment. And if you can even consider or even tap into that for one tiny second, to love so purely and to have no attachment. So my little one, as much as I loved him, and believe me, the third dimensionally was very attached. I was a helicopter mom. I had eyeballs on him constantly. I was incredibly attached. But there, it was just pure love. So I was still ready to go. These beings said, well, you don't have enough information to make this decision. We want you to understand that this little being would not be able to fulfill his destiny if he lost his mom at such a young age. And I was like, oh, apparently your personality goes with you, because I was negotiating even on the other side. It's like, oh, he'll be fine. He's an old soul. His dad's a good dad. They have a great relationship. He's going to be okay. Right. And there's like, well, we want you to feel the feeling of what this little being would feel at the loss of his mother. And I have to say that for the first 6 months, probably to a year after the NDE, I couldn't even tell this part of the story without just bursting into bawling my eyes out, because it was just so visceral. And what it felt like was shards of glass ripping through my soul. It was horrific. And you wouldn't wish that kind of grief, that kind of pain on your worst enemy, much less a little being, a little baby, right? So, or your son. But they did their job well. And that's kind of what I said is, oh, you're good. I was like, all right, I'm going back. I will be this little one's mom until he doesn't need me anymore. And I will, part of the negotiation is that I do the work of the light, and was, figuring out what that was. And then some additional negotiations of when I am ready to go, I get to go. And no drawn out illness, no struggle. When I decide to go, I get to go. And it was agreed. That was the big thing. And then instantly, when it was like agreed, I was back. I was basically on my deathbed, and I sat up in bed, and I was alert. I remembered everything except for like all the relationships, but everything was like very vivid, and everything was different. So I sat up in bed going, what just happened to me? Because I really didn't know what it was. Again, fantasy of death is what I was calling it. And everything was like glowing. It had a vibration that was just amplified. I sat in bed looking at everything, and I thought, I need help. I didn't know how much time had gone by that I was staring at this door in all its parts, the hinges and the doorknob, thinking it was just so extraordinarily beautiful. I was in such a stupor that I was just present. There was no noodling. Again, this was not me. The me would be trying to figure it out. I've always been what I called myself, a spiritual seeker. I'm a seeker. I want to make known the unknown. I want to know all the mysteries of life and yada, yada, yada. But this, I was just back and baffled and in it. I was basically on my deathbed, and then all of a sudden I was 90, I don't know, some percent well and different. Something had touched me. I had this residue that was left on me that I didn't really understand. And so I called my sister, and she had been studying meditation and some more esoteric spiritual practices through meditation. And I said, "Can I talk to you?" And I just kind of blurted the whole thing out. And she didn't say a word, let me get through the entire story. And when I was like, "What do you think?" And she blurted out, like, she in this exuberance, "Oh my God, you had, an exit opportunity, and people have exit opportunities, and I've never known anybody that had an exit opportunity." And she was just like talking really fast. And I'm like, whoa, little too much for me after just coming back from a very long trip, apparently. And got off the phone with her, and still, okay, so that was a little bit more information, but still in kind of this residue and this space that was just so beautiful and blissful. And then I called another friend of mine who was kind of not kind of, but was a spiritual confidant, and I respected her journey and called her and asked her what she thought. And she referred me to her spiritual advisor who was out of state. And I contacted Rosa, who is a spiritual coach, mentor, and she said it was a near-death experience. She said, "I've had three," I think she said. And she said, "It's textbook." She was saying, "Do you feel this way? Do you feel this way? Is this what you're experiencing?" And I was like, check, 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 check. She said, "It's a textbook near-death experience." And she said, "What you're feeling, this residue, is going to go. It'll slowly kind of dissolve away after a couple of weeks." And she was right on. So she said, "Journal it because you'll miss it." And I absolutely did, because it's like you settle back into the density of this world, and, it's not as great as the other side. So I came back with some extrasensory, people might say gifts, but they're really what we all have access to, and set me on a trajectory of doing the work that I do today.